upward as well. Yeah, so radiation, which is energy that comes from various sources, like ultraviolet radiation is an external source, for example. X-rays are a type of radiation. Microwaves are a type of radiation, but they're very large waves. Gamma rays are a type of radiation, and they're very, very small. Indeed, gamma rays don't have a mass, but they have such teeny tiny wavelengths that they are quite powerful. So a radiation causes ionization. That is when electrons are bumped out of the outer shell of an atom. So it can also be caused by the attraction of that electron by another atom. Ions carry a charge. That's due to an unequal number of protons and electrons. In a stable state, an atom will have an equal number of protons and electrons. They cancel each other out in charge. Electrons are negatively charged, protons are positively charged. So ionization is the transfer of electrons from one atom to another, and it increases the stability of the valence shell, in that the most stable valence shell has 8 electrons. That's the octet rule. 8 electrons in outer shell. Now that's stability. Terminology. An anion is an atom that has gained electrons. Therefore, it has a net negative charge. A cation is an atom that has lost an electron. It has a net positive charge. And you can remember that if you like cats, you feel positive about them. That could be how you remember that one. And ions with opposite charges are attracted to each other. So they form an ionic bond. And even when they're dissolved in liquid, they have an affinity for each other. Opposites attract. Electrolytes are those salts that are useful in the human body. Some of them are calcium chloride, disodium phosphate, for example, magnesium chloride. And these dissociate in the liquid in the body and serve as cations and anions. So calcium chloride, for example, serves as calcium and 2 chloride. Disodium phosphate into sodium and phosphates. Now, these are extremely important atoms in the system. They maintain electrolyte balance, they maintain osmolarity, they function in nervous function, they function in muscular contraction. And this little phosphate group here, oh my goodness, that's part of ATP. So there's 3 phosphates, adenosine triphosphate and ATP. That's where our energy comes from. Electrolytes. So electrolytes are salts that ionize in water. How much of our bodies is water? 70% or so. They form solutions capable of conducting electricity the body's most abundant dissolved electrolytes are sodium, calcium. Calcium has a double positive charge. Magnesium, also a double positive charge. Chloride, negative charge. A phosphate, a triple negative charge, and we'll see how that makes it such a fantastically energetic a molecule in ATP. And bicarbonate. And these are essential for nerve function, for osmotic effects, and I hope that you're writing this down, because we said before that writing things down does help to understand and remember things, because you're using different parts of the brain that way. If there is an imbalance in electrolytes, it can result in things such as muscle cramps. And that's why it's recommended that if you do very vigorous exercise, you lose water through sweating, but you also lose electrolytes. So you don't really need to, you know, drink Gatorade. So I think Gatorade's quite expensive. But you do need to replace your electrolytes. In serious cases, it can result in brittle bones, particularly with the loss of calcium. And if in very severe cases, coma and even fatality. And you can detect the nervous function or the electrical charge within the body due to the electrolytes with sensors. Free radicals, which is something a lot in the news, free radicals and antioxidants. I really want to talk about that also a little bit later, but I'll just give you a preview. Free radicals are a particle with an odd number of electrons. And an odd electron is unstable because it imbalances the charge balance within the atom. It's unpaired with another electron, so it has a rather unstable place in the world, being just an extra electron on an atom. It is produced by normal metabolic reactions, and we have a system to neutralize free radicals. They also occur as a result of radiation and some chemicals. So things like nitrites, I think that's one chemical. It's found in some wines, red wine, I think, and smoked meats. It causes tissue damage because there is a domino effect of these extra electrons. They will try to attach to another molecule, which bumps off another electron from that molecule. And that's a domino effect. So it can destroy molecules. It can cause cancer. It can cause death of heart tissue. So it may be a cause of myocardial infarction and also causes aging. Our body has a natural defense against free radicals to neutralize them. And in the diet, in particular, the types of vitamins that can help to neutralize free radicals are vitamin E, carotenoids, from which vitamin A is produced in the body, synthesized, and vitamin C. And we're going to cover free radicals again a little bit later on. Molecules and chemical bonds. A molecule is a structure with two or more atoms covalently bonded. N2 is a molecule of two of the same atoms. C6H12O6, that's sugar, glucose, that is a molecule of different atoms. Compounds are always two or more atoms of different elements. In both cases, they are covalently bonded. In other words, they're sharing their valence electrons. A molecular formula itemizes each element present and its quantity, and a structural formula shows arrangement of atoms. And some can have what are known as structural isomers, in other words, different arrangements of atoms. So the molecular formulae in this case is the same, C2H6O, C2H6O. They're identical, but the structural formula is different. So in this structure, you can see both carbon atoms are covalently bonded in the center. That gives you ethanol and alcohol. You can see in this case, the oxygen is in the center, and that gives you ethyl ether, ethyl ether, a gas. So in the case of these two substances, they have different chemical properties. Structural isomers have different chemical properties. In other words, they may be polar or nonpolar, they may be acidic or basic. They will have different properties. You may, in the course of your studies, have to calculate molecular weight. And we do that in order to make IV solutions, for example. So molecular weight of a compound is the sum of the atomic weights of its atoms. So let's calculate the molecular weight of glucose. Here's a glucose, C6H12O6. There are 6 carbon atoms, and they're 12 atomic mass units each. Why? Because each carbon atom has 6 protons and 6 neutrons. So we add them together to get the atomic mass units. If we multiply 6 carbon atoms that we have there by the 12 atomic mass units that they are each, we have 72 atomic mass units. So basically all you're doing is converting the addition of neutrons and protons, just converting that to atomic mass units, and you've got your weight. 12 hydrogen atoms, they are only 1 atomic mass unit 8 due to the proton. So that is 12 atomic mass units. Oxygen, we have 6 again. There are 16 atomic mass units each. They have, oxygen has 8 protons and 8 neutrons. We don't count the electrons in this case because electrons are so teeny tiny and small, they're somewhat negligible to calculating the molecular weight. That's 96, add them all together, we've got 180 atomic mass units. So that's how you measure molecular weight. Now let's talk about bonds and the strength of bonds between atoms. They contribute largely to the function of those molecules. I've listed them here with a relative strength. So covalent bonds, for example, they are the strongest. So it goes from strongest to weakest here. Covalent bonds are the strongest. Ionic bonds are second in strength. Hydrogen bonds are third, very weak really. And van der Waals reactions, which are just temporary fleeting bonds, in space and time. So let's look at a single covalent bond, hydrogen. This is a hydrogen atom, one proton, one electron, but electrons like to be in pairs, so together they share their electrons. And this is the hydrogen molecule, and that's how the hydrogen molecule exists in nature. Of course, there can be more than one covalent bond depending on the atoms that are in the molecule. In this case, it's nitrogen. Nitrogen happens to have 3 unpaired electrons in its outer shell, so it can share those with hydrogen, and we get ammonia. Double covalent bonds are stronger than single covalent bonds. In this case, we've got carbon dioxide. A carbon dioxide molecule has 2 oxygen atoms attached to the carbon, and they both share 2 electrons. We need to distinguish within covalent bonds whether or not they are polar or non-polar. So this is a carbon-carbon bond, non-polar. That means that the electrons are shared equally. This little cloud here shows there's an equal mass of electron sharing between the 2 atoms of carbon. But a polar covalent bond, in this case oxygen and hydrogen, it's polar because the electrons aren't shared equally. Indeed, oxygen is very greedy. Of course, that's not the proper term. Oxygen is very electronegative. An electronegative atom pulls electrons towards itself. And so therefore, the electrons spend more time around the oxygen atom than they do around the hydrogen atom. So that makes the oxygen end a little more negatively charged and the hydrogen end a little bit more positively charged. That is called a polar condition. And it occurs in small molecules. It also occurs on either side of a cell. Cells are generally negative on the inside, more positive on the outside. That makes it a polar condition. Ionic bonds, a little weaker, pretty easy to break, especially in water. And they are the attraction of a cation to an anion. If they're not dissolved in water, however, they can make a crystal, in this case a sodium chloride crystal. Water, which is our next topic, I spend quite a bit of time on it because it is the substance of life. It's what makes life possible on Earth because of the simple fact that it is a polar molecule. And because it's a polar molecule, it's a little bit positive where the hydrogen is, a little bit negative where the oxygen is. That means that the hydrogen of one molecule will make a hydrogen bond with the negative atom of another molecule. Hydrogen bonds are always depicted by a dotted line. So hydrogen bonds are so important. They're important, of course, in water, but they're also very important in a lot of the molecules that we have in our bodies, including DNA. In DNA, the double helix is held together by hydrogen bonds. Fortunately, individually, they're fairly weak, and so that's why we can replicate our DNA so readily. So that's where I wanted to stop this lecture. Thank you for watching.